G'day folks, welcome to part 2 of this learning diary for Axis Empire's Dai Senso. I've been working my way through the relevant rules, the read before playing and the read as you play. I've made my way forward through these just to have a heads up before I do any moves to understand the implications of what I'm doing before I do them. And I have to say there's nothing too scary thus far in what I've been reading. It's pretty common stuff for most war games. So there are sticky zones of control. All enemies project a zone of control into adjacent hexes, which are blocked by mountainous hex sides, and friendly units can negate enemy zones of control for various purposes, mainly movement. There are pretty simple stacking rules. In most hexes, this will be 3 ground units with a total of 6 steps combined. In various other hexes, such as beachheads, or some hexes may have the limited stacking symbol. Let me see if we can see one. No, none on the map at the moment. There are some on some of the islands down to the southeast throughout the Pacific, but none on this map at the present. They may have a sort of reduced stacking of 3 ground units with a total of 3 steps between them. But for this scenario, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Then the rules go into the sequence of play, which is summarised here. And for this scenario, we're really starting at the support segment here. And we really have just fast forwarding to the support unit and convoy placement segment of this phase. Now the Russians have an Air Force support unit, and they can place this Air Force unit according to these placement rules within 3 hexes of a valid air base. Now an air base is any land hex containing a city, port, road or rail and a supplied ground unit. Now you may notice there's, this is town over here, so this could be a valid airbase. There's also this road around here, which could be a valid airbase. And then of course, within 3 hexes of that, 1, 2, 3, we can potentially place this air unit directly into Harbin. And the reason I'm doing this is because this is the primary objective of Russia in this scenario. The Soviet faction wins, I'm reading from the victory conditions, the Soviet faction wins if it controls Harbin at the end of the Soviet reserve movement phase. Otherwise, the Axis faction wins. And this is incidentally where the Japanese have placed their main 3-step army. So we're placing the Air Force here. Again, I don't understand the full implications of this, but I'm figuring that this is the main hex that I want to capture. So perhaps that's where the Air Force should go. The next segment is in the Blitz marker segment. And the Russians also have a Blitz marker. Now, I don't understand too much about these just yet. But what I do know, just from reading that brief segment, is that this turns a city into an open city, and doing so cancels their ability to convert retreats into step losses. So ultimately, my thinking is I want the Japanese to retreat from this city, not just take step losses there. So by placing the Blitz marker here, it prevents them from cancelling their retreats and will thus, down the track, I think, enable me to capture this city. This is just my limited understanding thus far. And again, I've just read a few paragraphs through here. I have not read the full beachhead support contesting kind of rules. I've just read the bare basics to grasp this thus far. Now, the scenario also advises you to read through the organisation segment regarding combination, fortress conversion, voluntary elimination, breakdown, and so forth. So I have a sound grasp of that. Basically, 2 steps combined to make a 2-step unit. The Axis Force Pool Summary indicates sort of certain headquarters units that can be formed, large armies, by bringing together various forces. For this scenario, now I've been looking, and I don't know if I want to do anything like that. I'm pretty happy with the forces I have. Got some nice stacks, sort of Russian forces engaged around the front, ready to attack the Japanese. So I have an understanding of these rules of voluntary elimination, breakdown. I understand what the attachments do, but I don't know if I want to do anything with the Russians right now. So I can end that initial administration phase and head down to the operational movement phase and the combat phase. And this is really where things get exciting. So the first part of this is movement. And again, there's nothing too scary or unfamiliar about this. There's the basic hex-to-hex movement based on the movement allowance of these units. There are factors to consider such as enemy zones of control, hex side terrain and hex terrain. An important rule here is the minimum of 1 hex movement. So whilst it may cost several movement points to move in here, and this unit here only has 1 movement point, they can move that minimum of 1 step, which I'm going to do. And by doing so, they negate this the enemy zone of control. Now I'm going to follow this up by also moving these units across that river and bring some of these units around from Vladivostok, leaving the garrison behind, focusing my effort around this weaker colonial unit, and then hopefully a path through to the open city. Out on the left, it's a little bit more difficult. I suppose I could cross this river here, and I could also really densely stack this hex here. I could move the units that started here around, but there's not much they could do. I guess we'll bring these units up. They can join the combat, I suppose. Again, I'm just thinking about bare basics here. Yeah, we might maybe. I'm kind of tempted to bring this armoured unit out, but then I don't know where they actually go. So yeah, I think I'll leave them there. And that's my operational movement phase done. We now get to, and I should also point out, there are overrun rules, but there are no opportunities for overrun in this particular scenario setup. So then we get to the combat phase. And there's no airdrop, so the first thing we do is Blitz Combat. This Blitz Combat marker gives all these attacking units 1 extra sort of round of combat prior to the regular combat segment. So another thing I've just realised, I've been reading up on Blitz enabled, and I didn't mention this earlier, but by placing this Blitz marker here, all friendly units within 2 hexes become Blitz enabled. That means that these friendly units around here, not these out on the left, are Blitz enabled. So this here will be my main Blitz area, and this is where I'm focusing on for Blitz Combat. During the Blitz Combat segment in the combat phase, any Blitz enabled units get an additional round of combat. This is the first thing that I want to do. So I designate target hex, which is this colonial Japanese infantry here. I designate the attackers, which will be these 2 hexes here. You'll notice this hex side here, I think is an impassable lake hex side. Only marine units can attack across there. So this garrison unit is just holding back in Vladivostok. So it'll be these 2 hexes here attacking that defending unit. And we can also call on this headquarters unit back here for ranged support. A supplied headquarters unit can help out with the combat even if they're not adjacent to the target hex. they basically provide their attack factor of 2 towards the resolution of that combat. At the same time, though, there's a Kwangtung headquarters unit adjacent to that colonial unit. So the defender would normally also be able to draw on these headquarters for support. There are a lot of restrictions with regards to minor countries and colonial forces and so forth. I would think that the headquarters can provide support to that colonial infantry there. I'm going to say they can. I haven't read anything yet, well, maybe I have, but I can't remember reading anything to suggest that they can't. So they will also add their defense value of 2 to that infantry defending. So now we just add up the attack and defense factors. So we have 6, 12, 13, 14 against the defenders 4. So we have 3 to 1, 3.5 to 1 combat odds. Now there's also this battle is taking place in rough terrain. I think it's called a forest or woods. So there's a 1 column to the left shift for that. Now there's a river here, but there's no river on this hex side. So when there's a mix, you apply the lowest hex side modifier. In this case, no modifier for this, so there's no modifier for the combat. If this stack were, for example, over here and they were both attacking across the river, then the lowest would be a 1 column shift. As it is, it's just the net 1 column shift for that forest, which brings it down to the 2 to 1 column. Now I should also point out that the attacking headquarters provides a 1 column shift to the right, but this is negated by the defending headquarters, which provides 1 to the left. So they both basically cancel each other out for a net 0 for those supporting ranged headquarters. So with that done, we can get our magic die and miss the ball completely, but it's a 6. So a 2 to 1 column 6 result is an AD00 result. Well, it's about the worst possible result. It is the worst possible result for the attackers. It's an attacker defeated. All attacking ground units must retreat 1 hex, or one of the attacking units must take a step loss. If retreat is possible, the attacker chooses which to do. Well, let's say that one of these guys will take... Actually, we'll move these. We'll take it from these guys. One attacking unit will take a step loss. That was unfortunate. I think any other result from 1 to 5 would have seen the defender destroyed. But that was just Blitz Combat. Now we get to the regular combat segment, and we're going to try that attack again. This time we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have 10, 11, 12 versus 4. So it is still 3 to 1, down to 2 to 1. So we get the same odds part of regular combat now. Roll a die, and we get a 1, which is much better. 2 to 1 is a DR2 result. So with a retreat result, you ignore movement points and movement requirements. You just retreat the indicated number of hexes. In this case, 2 hexes, and they just go back 1, 2. There are various priorities and restrictions. It has to be further away from the defending hex than any previous hex retreated into. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Except, I've just realised that when a unit retreats, I've just reread this, if a force retreats into a hex containing other ground units, all ground units in that hex are now part of the retreating stack and must be included in any remaining retreats and attrition results. So if they retreat there, they have to take the headquarters with them and retreat again. So by retreating here first, they can then pick up that stack and retreat to here. So there's a bit of a route. And again, the Japanese are wanting to hold on to this city. They can't, of course, retreat into the enemy zone of control here, and I'm pretty confident that this zone of control is negated by the presence of those friendly units for the purpose of retreat. And it's also worth pointing out that there is sometimes mandatory retreat conversion if a retreating force cannot retreat without violating retreat priorities. They must convert unsatisfied retreat results into step losses, but there's also voluntary retreat conversion. A defending force may convert retreat results into step losses on a one-for-one basis if all attacking ground forces attacked across a straight, beachhead or mountain hex sides. That wasn't the case. Or if the defending hex, the actual hex defended, contains a city without a blitz or Totsugeki marker. And again, that wasn't the case. And that wouldn't apply if they passed through the city. So they can't go there and then take a step loss. It has to be the actual defending hex. And again, this is one of the reasons I place the blitz marker here, to prevent that that voluntary retreat conversion from being able to happen. And finally, after that retreat, there is attrition, but this was a 0-0 result, so there was no attrition for either side in this combat. And the last thing we have to do is advance after combat, and the Russians are keen to move in up to their maximum stacking limit. So 3 units, 6 steps, they're right outside the city. So we've also got some combat taking place out here on the left. And what have we got? I'm going to focus my energy on this hex here. So we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 versus 2, which is 5 to 1. It's in clear terrain. There are no negative hex sites to worry about. No headquarters in the area. This headquarters here is out of range of the defending hex. And keeping in mind that this is traced to the defending hex. So it's not to the attacking units, it's to the hex where the battle is taking place. So again, 10 versus 2, 5 to 1. No modifiers. And another terrible result. This is an exchange result. So either all attacking ground units retreat 1 hex, or one of the attacking ground units takes a step loss, which they'll do. Now, if the attacker retreats, the defender does nothing. If they take a step loss, then all ground units must retreat 1 hex or take a step loss. And they'll take a step loss just to stop those Russians over here from advancing. There is, however, no attrition on that either. That was a 0-0 result as well. So that combat also ends. Now at the end of that blitz and regular combat, we do the marker segment. This is where we remove the blitz marker from the city. We then proceed to reserve movement phase. Well, unfortunately, I didn't get to battle against that city, so there's not many places I really want to move to. There's nothing really the Russians can do at this stage by the end of this one turn scenario to capture the city, unfortunately. So, yeah, they can't conduct an overrun, they can't move into or out of a hex containing an enemy zone of control. That's about it. So the Russians unfortunately fell short by failing in their first combat, in that blitz combat role. They needed to win the blitz combat and then advance. Alternatively, I could have pushed from the left and tried to push this out of the way with blitz combat and then advance and overrun the city, attack against the city during regular combat. So yeah, that results in an Axis faction victory. Normally, you'd go through the final administration phase, permanent occasional events before moving on to the Western faction turn. Well, sorry, this was the Soviet faction turn. I was running through the wrong part of the card. But that's basically how a turn, normally you'd go Axis, Western, and then Soviet. So that's the basis for movement and combat, showing the various factors that apply. I did, of course, forgot to apply the column shift for that very important Air Force unit. Had I applied that, it would have resulted in an exchange result instead of an attacker defeated result. But even so, that colonial unit could have just taken a step loss instead of retreating, which would have, when I rolled that 6 instead of the AD, it would be an exchange. They could take that step loss. It would have meant that the Russian regular combat on this hex would have been much more powerful. They probably, with a 1 result, it would have been a 12-1, which would have been a DR3. And again, they would have retreated 3 hexes instead of 2, but still, the Russians wouldn't have captured the city. And finally, that Air Force marker remains in the hex until the following turn, and during the support segment, the first step is return to base. All phasing player, this is in the Russian turn, all phasing player support units are removed from the map. It has a delay stripe on it, that black stripe, which means that it is placed in the delay box before then returning to the Soviet force pool to be placed in again in a subsequent turn. Alright folks, well that is August Storm. Apart from that little slip up in forgetting to apply the Air Force modifier to that combat, which was thankfully inconsequential, or of little consequence I should say, I feel like I've got a sound grasp of the basics of combat and movement. There are, again, no surprises here, nothing scary. And again, I put this down to the beautiful layout of the rulebook and the scenario. This is very much user-friendly. It is great. I'm going to keep repeating this, but it is great to see a big game like this designed to help get new players up and running with the system quite quickly.